The sun hung like a burning jewel in the sky, casting golden waves of heat over the endless dunes of the Sahara. The wind carried the dry scent of sand and distant palm trees as the crew of John Wick 3 set up for the next scene. Cameras, lights, and equipment stood like monuments on the desert floor, while crew members moved quickly to shield themselves from the sun's harsh glare. In the midst of this organized chaos, Keanu Reeves stood calmly, wiping sweat from his brow. Clad in a lightweight linen shirt and cargo pants, he gazed across the vast sea of sand, marveling at the quiet power of the desert. Despite the heat, he wasn't complaining. Keanu had always been the type to embrace adventure, and the beauty of the Sahara was worth every drop of sweat. Keanu, a production assistant, called out, jogging toward him with a bottle of water. "We got a break for the next few hours while the lighting crew adjusts for the evening shoot." Keanu smiled and accepted the bottle. "Thanks. What do people do around here for fun?" The assistant laughed. "Fun? In the middle of the desert? Well, you could take a nap in the shade, or if you're feeling adventurous, you could take one of the locals up on their offer to ride a camel." Keanu raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "A camel, huh?" Before the assistant could respond, a voice from behind them chimed in. Yes, yes. Camel ride. Very fun." They turned to see a local guide named Mustafa, a wiry man with a bright smile and a traditional Moroccan jalaba. He held the reins of a large, tan camel with a calm demeanor and long eyelashes that flicked lazily against the sun. Keanu grinned. "I'm in." Minutes later, he found himself seated on the camel's back, swaying gently as Mustafa led them away from the set and into the quieter parts of the desert. The rhythmic plodding of the camel's hooves against the sand was soothing, and the vast, open landscape stretched infinitely in all directions. It was exactly the kind of peaceful escape Keanu had hoped for. "This is incredible," Keanu said, his voice filled with genuine awe. Mustafa laughed. "Yes, the desert is special. It looks empty, but it is full of life if you know where to look." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds being the gentle rustling of the wind and the occasional grunt from the camel. But just as Keanu was beginning to lose himself in the serenity, a distant noise caught his attention. It was faint, carried by the wind, a mechanical sputtering, followed by what sounded like a shout. Keanu sat up straighter, scanning the horizon. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Mustafa paused, listening. The noise came again, louder this time. Without hesitation, Mustafa tugged on the camel's reins, steering them toward the source of the sound. As they crested a dune, Keanu spotted a young boy, no older than 16, kneeling next to a broken-down motorbike. His clothes were dusty, and his expression was one of panic as he tried unsuccessfully to restart the engine. "Hey!" Keanu called out, waving as they approached. The boy looked up, relief washing over his face. He stood quickly and wiped his hands on his pants. "Help, please! The bike. It stopped working, and I don't know what to do." Keanu slid off the camel and approached the boy, who introduced himself as Ahmed. The motorbike lay tilted on its side, the wheels half buried in the sand. A large plastic container filled with water was strapped to the back, its weight contributing to the bike's instability. "What's the water for?" Keanu asked, crouching down to inspect the bike. "For my family," Ahmed explained. "We live in a small village on the other side of the dunes. I was bringing water back when the bike broke down. If I don't get it home soon, we won't have enough for the night." Keanu's mind raced. The sun was still high, but in the desert, nightfall could come quickly, and temperatures would drop dramatically. He glanced at Mustafa, who seemed to be thinking the same thing. "The bike's not going anywhere anytime soon," Keanu said, standing up and dusting off his hands. "But we've got a camel, and camels are pretty good at carrying heavy loads." Ahmed's eyes widened. "You'd help me?" Keanu smiled. "Of course. Let's get the water loaded up." With Mustafa's help, they carefully transferred the container of water onto the camel's back, securing it with ropes. The camel grunted in protest, but eventually settled as Mustafa whispered soothing words. "Lead the way," Keanu said to Ahmed, gesturing for him to take the reins. The journey through the dunes was slow but steady. Ahmed walked alongside the camel, occasionally glancing at Keanu with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. They talked as they walked, with Ahmed sharing stories about life in the desert, how he helped his family tend to their small farm, how he dreamed of one day becoming a guide like Mustafa, and how the desert, despite its harshness, felt like home. "What about you?" Ahmed asked after a while. "Why are you here?" Keanu chuckled. "I'm an actor. We're filming a movie nearby." Ahmed's eyes lit up. "A movie? That's amazing. Are you famous?" Keanu hesitated, then nodded modestly. "Some people know me." Ahmed smiled. "You don't act like a famous person." Keanu laughed. "That's probably a good thing." As they continued their journey, the wind picked up, and the dunes shifted slightly under their feet. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows that made the landscape even more breathtaking. But then, just as they were nearing the top of a particularly steep dune, the wind suddenly intensified. Sand swirled around them in thick gusts, making it difficult to see. Mustafa shouted something, but his voice was drowned out by the howling wind. "Sandstorm!" Ahmed yelled, his voice barely audible. Keanu's heart raced as he grabbed Ahmed's arm and pulled him toward the camel. "We need to find shelter," he shouted, scanning the area for anything that could provide cover. In the distance, he spotted what looked like the remnants of an old stone structure, perhaps a forgotten outpost or a shepherd's shelter. "There!" He pointed, and Mustafa quickly led the way, urging the camel forward. The sandstorm grew fiercer with every passing second, the grains stinging their skin like tiny needles. But Keanu kept moving, his grip on Ahmed firm as they fought against the wind. When they finally reached the structure, they ducked inside, gasping for breath. The walls of the stone shelter provided relief from the storm's fury, but the wind still howled outside, rattling the wooden door. Ahmed leaned against the wall, his chest rising and falling rapidly. "Are you okay?" Keanu asked, kneeling beside him. Ahmed nodded, though his hands trembled. "I've been in sandstorms before, but this one is bad." Keanu placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "We'll be fine. These storms usually pass quickly." Mustafa secured the camel outside and joined them inside the shelter. "We are lucky to have found this place," he said, brushing sand off his clothes. "Many travelers are not so fortunate." Keanu glanced at Ahmed, who was staring at the floor, lost in thought. "Hey," he said gently, "we're safe now. Tell me more about your dream of becoming a guide." Ahmed looked up, his eyes filled with determination. "I want to show people the beauty of the desert. Not just the sand, but the life hidden within it. Most people think the desert is empty, but it's not. There's so much to discover." Keanu smiled. "Sounds like you'd be a great guide." As the storm raged outside, Keanu couldn't help but feel that this moment, this chance encounter in the middle of the Sahara, was more than just coincidence. It was a reminder of the unexpected connections life could offer when you least expected them. The sandstorm howled outside, but within the shelter's sturdy walls, time seemed to pause. Keanu sat on the cool stone floor next to Ahmed, who had calmed down significantly. The boy wiped the sand from his face, a small smile breaking through the weariness. Mustafa busied himself adjusting the camel's ropes and supplies, occasionally glancing out of the small window to check on the storm's progress. For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind, like a distant ocean roaring across the dunes. "Tell me about your family," Keanu said, breaking the silence. Ahmed hesitated, then nodded. "There's my mother, my younger sister Aisha, and my grandfather. My father passed away 2 years ago." Keanu's expression softened. "I'm sorry to hear that." Ahmed shrugged, trying to put on a brave face. "It's okay. He taught me a lot before he passed, like how to find water in the desert, how to read the stars, and how to take care of our animals. When he died, I had to help my mom with the farm. That's why I'm the one who brings back water now." "You've taken on a lot of responsibility," Keanu said. "You should be proud of yourself." Ahmed's eyes flicked downward, as if he wasn't sure how to accept the compliment. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough. The farm is small, and it's hard to make ends meet." But I can't leave my family to chase dreams. Why not? Keanu asked. Dreams don't have to mean abandoning the people you care about. Sometimes they're the reason you keep going. Ahmed looked thoughtful, but before he could respond, Mustafa spoke up. The storm is easing, he said, peering out the window. We should be able to leave soon. Keanu stood and stretched, his muscles slightly stiff from sitting on the cold floor. Good, let's get this water to Ahmed's family. Mustafa nodded, and they stepped outside, greeted by a calmer wind and a sky that had softened to a muted orange as the sun began its descent. The desert looked reborn, its surface freshly sculpted by the storm, with rippling dunes stretching endlessly in every direction. The camel, resilient as ever, grunted in protest when Mustafa tugged on its reins, but it quickly fell into step as they resumed their journey. Ahmed took the lead, his footsteps sure and steady despite the shifting sands. They walked for another hour, the cool evening breeze offering relief from the day's oppressive heat. As they crested a final dune, Ahmed pointed ahead. There! That's my village. In the distance, a small cluster of stone houses came into view, nestled against a patch of green where date palms swayed gently in the wind. The sight of home seemed to energize Ahmed, and he quickened his pace, eager to deliver the precious water. As they entered the village, a woman in a simple dress with a scarf wrapped around her head rushed toward them, her face lighting up when she saw Ahmed. Thank God you're safe, she cried, pulling him into a tight hug. I'm fine, Mama, Ahmed reassured her. I had help. The woman looked up, her eyes landing on Keanu and Mustafa. Thank you, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. I don't know what we would have done if something had happened to him. Keanu smiled warmly. He's a good kid. He didn't need much help, just a little boost. Mustafa and Ahmed began unloading the water from the camel, while Keanu followed the woman inside their modest home. The interior was simple but welcoming, with colorful rugs covering the floor and the smell of freshly baked bread wafting through the air. Ahmed's younger sister, Aisha, peeked out from behind a curtain, her eyes wide with curiosity. This is Aisha, Ahmed said, introducing her. She's shy. Keanu knelt down to her level and offered a kind smile. Hi, Aisha. It's nice to meet you. She giggled and quickly disappeared behind the curtain, but not before peeking out once more to steal another glance at him. Over dinner, they shared stories and laughter. Ahmed's mother served traditional Moroccan dishes, tagine with tender lamb, couscous, and sweet mint tea. Keanu was struck by the warmth and hospitality of the family, despite their limited resources. As the meal came to an end, Ahmed's mother turned to Keanu. I don't know how we can repay you. There's no need, Keanu replied sincerely. I'm just glad we were in the right place at the right time. Before he could say more, Ahmed stood up and disappeared into the next room, returning moments later with a small wooden box. He opened it carefully and pulled out a beautifully woven bracelet made of intricate leather and colorful beads. This is for you, Ahmed said, holding it out to Keanu. It's not much, but my grandfather made it. We give them to people who do something special for our family. Keanu accepted the bracelet, slipping it onto his wrist. Thank you. I'll treasure it. The night deepened, and it was time for Keanu and Mustafa to head back to the set. As they stepped outside, the cool night air wrapped around them like a comforting blanket. The stars above sparkled brilliantly, their light reflecting off the dunes like diamonds scattered across the sand. Ahmed walked them to the edge of the village, where the camel waited patiently. Will you ever come back? He asked, his voice tinged with hope. Keanu placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. You never know, but if you ever need anything, find a way to reach out. Dreams have a funny way of connecting people, even across deserts. Ahmed nodded, his gaze lingering on Keanu as he mounted the camel. I'll remember that. With a final wave, Keanu and Mustafa set off into the night, the distant glow of the film set guiding them back. The desert was quiet again, but this time, Keanu felt something different, a sense of fulfillment that came not from fame or success, but from a simple act of kindness. As they rode, Mustafa glanced over at him. You have a way with people, he said. Keanu chuckled. I just listen. Mustafa nodded knowingly. Listening is the most powerful thing a person can do. By the time they reached the set, the crew was preparing for the evening shoot. Keanu dismounted the camel and thanked Mustafa for the ride. Before heading back to his trailer, he looked up at the sky once more, the stars shining just as brightly as they had in the village. Because sometimes, the most meaningful adventures aren't scripted. They're the ones you stumble upon when you least expect them. The evening shoot went smoothly, but Keanu's mind remained in the village, replaying Ahmed's words and the warmth of their dinner together. As the final scene wrapped, the crew applauded, signaling the end of the day's work. Keanu, however, wasn't in a hurry to leave. He stayed back to watch the last bit of equipment being packed up, the glow of the set fading into the night as the desert returned to its natural, serene state. Long day, huh? Mustafa appeared beside him, adjusting the scarf around his neck to block the cool breeze. Yeah, Keanu said softly. But worth it. You're still thinking about Ahmed, aren't you? Mustafa asked knowingly. Keanu smiled faintly. He reminded me of myself when I was younger, unsure of the future, but full of dreams. Mustafa leaned on a nearby crate and crossed his arms. It's rare to see someone like you, someone who doesn't let the world of fame change them. Keanu shrugged, gazing out at the dunes. I don't see the point in changing. We all come from somewhere, and no amount of money or recognition should make us forget that. Mustafa nodded, a hint of admiration in his eyes. You've done more for that boy today than you realize. As the conversation lingered, one of the production assistants approached, holding out a phone. Mr. Reeves, there's a call for you. Your assistant. Keanu took the phone, walking a few steps away for privacy. Hey, what's up? I got your email, his assistant said on the other end. You wanted me to look into something for Ahmed? Yeah, Keanu replied, his voice steady but hopeful. See if we could set up something, maybe a scholarship or an apprenticeship program. He's smart and driven. I don't want him to miss his chance because of circumstances. I'll see what I can do, the assistant promised. I have a few contacts in educational organizations and local programs in Morocco. I'll reach out tomorrow. Thanks, Keanu said, relief washing over him. Keep me updated. As he hung up, Mustafa approached again, sensing the conversation had been important. Good news? I'm working on something for Ahmed, Keanu admitted. I don't want this to be just another fleeting moment for him. Mustafa smiled warmly. You have a good heart. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Keanu decided to pay one last visit to Ahmed's village before leaving for the next shooting location. He convinced Mustafa to join him, and they mounted the camel once again, the early morning breeze crisp and refreshing. The ride was peaceful, the desert bathed in soft, golden light. The camel trotted steadily, its hooves creating gentle impressions in the sand. Keanu felt a sense of anticipation, eager to see Ahmed again and share the news of what he was trying to arrange. As they approached the village, the familiar sight of date palms and stone houses came into view. Ahmed was already outside, feeding a pair of goats when he noticed the camel approaching. His face lit up with excitement, and he ran to greet them. You came back, Ahmed exclaimed, beaming. Keanu dismounted the camel and ruffled Ahmed's hair playfully. Of course I did. I wanted to check on you. Ahmed led them into the house, where his mother greeted them warmly. Aisha peeked out from behind the curtain again, giggling when Keanu waved at her. They sat together over a simple breakfast of bread, honey, and mint tea, the atmosphere as welcoming as it had been the night before. After the meal, Keanu pulled Ahmed aside and sat with him on a small bench outside the house. The morning sun warmed the stone walls, and the gentle rustling of palm trees filled the air. I've been thinking about what you said, Keanu began, about wanting to be a guide and show people the beauty of the desert. Ahmed nodded, his expression serious. I made some calls, Keanu continued. There's a program that helps young people like you get the training they need to work in tourism and guiding. If you're interested, I can help you apply. Ahmed's eyes widened, and for a moment, he was speechless. You do that for me? Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. You've already done most of the work by dreaming big. I'm just helping you get a step closer. Tears welled in Ahmed's eyes, but he quickly wiped them away. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Keanu replied. Just promise me you'll keep working hard. Ahmed nodded vigorously. I promise. As they stood up, Ahmed's mother appeared in the doorway, watching them with a knowing smile. Keanu felt a wave of warmth. This wasn't just about helping Ahmed. It was about showing an entire family that dreams could be nurtured, even in the most unlikely places. Before leaving, Ahmed handed Keanu a small bag of dates, insisting it was a token of their appreciation. You'll remember us, right? The boy asked. Keanu chuckled. I'll never forget this place. With a final wave, he and Mustafa mounted the camel and began their journey back to the set. The desert, now fully awake under the morning sun, seemed less vast and more connected. A reminder that even in its emptiness, life could bloom unexpectedly. As they rode, Mustafa turned to Keanu. You've made a difference today. Keanu smiled. Maybe, but Ahmed will do the real work. I just gave him a little push. When they arrived back at the set, the crew was already preparing for the next day's shoot. Keanu dismounted the camel, feeling a sense of contentment he hadn't experienced in a long time. He glanced down at the leather bracelet Ahmed had given him, tracing the intricate patterns with his fingers. It was a reminder that sometimes the most impactful moments weren't scripted or planned. They just happened when you opened yourself to them. As the desert wind brushed against Keanu's face, he stood near the makeshift trailer, watching the crew prepare for the final scenes of the day. The hum of generators, the soft clanking of metal equipment, and the occasional shouts of directors blended into the background like a distant melody. But Keanu's mind wasn't focused on the movie set. It was still in the small, humble village where he had spent the morning. A production assistant walked by, handing Keanu a bottle of water. We're rolling in 15 minutes, Mr. Reeves, she said with a polite smile. Keanu nodded, but instead of heading toward his mark, he pulled out his phone and checked for updates. As promised, his assistant had reached out to several contacts, and one of the messages caught Keanu's attention. Good news! The local tourism board is interested in Ahmed. They're willing to cover his training and offer him an internship with a local guide service once he finishes. All they need is his application and a letter of recommendation. Keanu's lips curved into a satisfied smile. He quickly typed a response. Tell them they'll have everything by the end of the week. I'll help Ahmed with his application tonight. He slipped the phone back into his pocket just as the director called everyone to their places. Keanu shook off his thoughts and focused on the task at hand. The scene was intense, choreographed fight sequences against the backdrop of the stunning desert landscape. But even as he dodged punches and delivered lines with precision, a part of him remained tethered to the promise he had made to Ahmed. Later that evening, the set was quiet. Most of the crew had retreated to their tents or trailers, exhausted from the day's shoot. Keanu, however, sat outside under the vast expanse of stars, the cool desert breeze ruffling his hair. His laptop glowed faintly on the makeshift wooden table in front of him as he reviewed the application forms Ahmed needed to complete. A shadow approached from the distance, and Keanu looked up to see Mustafa leading a familiar figure, Ahmed, with a wide smile and a backpack slung over his shoulder. You really meant it, Ahmed said, his voice filled with wonder as he took a seat across from Keanu. Of course, Keanu replied. I don't make promises I can't keep. They worked together for the next hour, filling out forms and crafting a heartfelt letter of recommendation. Ahmed spoke excitedly about his dreams, and Keanu listened, occasionally offering advice or helping him phrase his thoughts. The boy's enthusiasm was contagious, and Keanu couldn't help but admire his determination. When they finished, Keanu saved the documents and closed the laptop. We'll send these out tomorrow. You're officially on your way. Ahmed beamed. I can't believe this is happening. Thank you. Keanu leaned back, gazing up at the stars. You did this, Ahmed. I just helped connect the dots. Ahmed hesitated, then asked, Why are you helping me? You've already done so much. Keanu thought for a moment before answering. Because someone helped me once when I needed it. They didn't have to, but they did. And it changed my life. Now it's my turn to do the same for someone else. The boy's eyes glistened with gratitude. "I won't forget this." Keanu smiled. "I know you won't." The next morning, the desert was bathed in golden light as the sun began its ascent over the dunes. Keanu and Mustafa accompanied Ahmed back to the village one last time. This time, they traveled not in silence, but with laughter and stories filling the air. The camel plodded along steadily, as if sensing the significance of this final journey. When they arrived, Ahmed's family was waiting, their faces bright with joy as they heard the news. Ahmed's mother hugged Keanu tightly, whispering words of gratitude in a language he didn't fully understand but could feel in his heart. Before leaving, Ahmed handed Keanu a small, hand-carved wooden figurine of a camel. "To remember the desert," he said shyly. Keanu accepted it, running his fingers over the smooth surface. "I'll keep this with me." With a final wave, Keanu and Mustafa began their trek back to the set. The desert stretched out before them, vast and mysterious, but it no longer felt like an empty expanse. It felt alive, filled with connections and possibilities. As they reached the film crew's base camp, Mustafa turned to Keanu. "What you did for that boy, it's rare." Keanu smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. It felt right. That night, as Keanu prepared to leave for the next location, he sat on the steps of his trailer, holding the small wooden camel in his hands. The desert wind whispered around him, carrying memories of a boy with big dreams and the power of a simple, unexpected encounter. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. "Ahmed's application has been received. They're excited to have him." Keanu leaned back, letting out a content sigh. The movie shoot was just another part of his life, but this was the kind of story that stayed with him. A story of hope, kindness, and the belief that even the smallest gestures could create ripples far beyond what anyone could see. As the stars shimmered above, Keanu knew one thing for certain: life's greatest moments often happened when you weren't looking for them. And with that thought, he packed his things, ready to leave the Sahara behind, but not the lessons it had given him.